Okay, about 10 seconds. Okay. 5. Okay, folks. Young lady here you've been waiting for from New Hampshire. This is Betty Hill.
Thank you. Today I am going to speak about miracles. When I was a child, we lived as people had lived for decades, maybe hundreds of years. And the first miracle that we had was electricity. And suddenly we had lighting inside our homes. Later we had electric pumps with running water and indoor bathrooms. Our heating changed from coal and oil to oil, from coal and wood to oil, gas, and solar. And then we had street lights. So today, we know we went from a black, dark planet and seen from space, we're a bright, sparkling one. The second miracle was transportation. When I was a child, you walked, and then we had bicycles, motorcycles, and automobiles. But we couldn't use automobiles until they developed antifreeze and heaters, so we could use them year-round. And that led to the paving of roads, highways, traffic lights, increased police, and all. And we did have trains before that, but that was the only means of transportation. And so we went from automobiles to planes, to clipper ships, to jets, to Sputnik, to the day's space program. We also had two beliefs that were common in my generation. One was life existed many, many places in the universe, and occasionally people from these other planets came here. It was very, very rare, but over the centuries people had reported seeing them. And another common belief was that the earth had been destroyed. Life on this planet had been destroyed many times. And we know that human beings from Lucy and her group were 2.5 million years old. And we just found the remains of a human 6 million years old. So we've been in various forms of human life here for many years. And because of these 4 factors, is this why UFOs are coming here? They're looking us over. We're bright, we're shining, and maybe deadly. Now, September 19, 1961, Barney and I were in Montreal, Canada, when we heard a weather report. Hurricane was coming up the coast, and a possibility it would hit Portsmouth. So we changed our plans and decided to drive home. We left Montreal. We knew that it was after tourist season, so we knew there'd be almost no cars, all facilities would be closed. So we stopped in Colebrook, got gas for the car, had a lunch, and left Colebrook about 10 o'clock, headed down through the mountains. Barney's driving. I see a bright star in the sky. And as I'm watching, it's getting bigger and bright. My first thought is this a comet? Is this an asteroid? Are they going to hit this planet? So we stopped the car to get out to look. And at that moment, it changed from a star into a craft. It flew across the face of the moon, and it was surrounded by flashing multicolored lights. And we had no idea what this was. We were puzzled. Well, we got back in the car, started driving south, and then it came in, it began pacing us, followed us for approximately 30 miles. We're not afraid, we're just curious, we're puzzled. What is this thing? And at one point, I put the window down, waved hi. Very soon after that, it left the top of the mountain, came out over the highway, and stopped right over, directly in front of us, about 30 feet in the air. Barney, who had been in World War II, took the binoculars. He's going to identify this craft. And as he walks towards it, it shifted out over the field. He looked up, he could see a big lighted window and a group of men standing behind the window. And then a fin-like structure parted away from this craft on each side with a red light, and it started to come down. At that moment, Barney became frightened, had the feeling they were trying to capture him, ran back to the car. We went speeding down the highway. We'd only gone a short distance when we heard a second beeping sound, first beeping sound, and then the car vibrated. And we drove along, and we didn't see him. We're looking, but we didn't see this craft again. And then, about 30 miles south, we saw what we thought was the moon setting. And then, all of a sudden, there's the group of men, the ones he'd seen on the craft, standing in the road blocking our way. Excuse me. Barney braked the car, and then our next remembrance, we saw the men, he stopped the car, and our next memory was driving back to the main highway, and we heard a second series of beeping sounds, and we came home. Now, when we arrived home, first thing we noticed, the trip had taken longer than it should. Our watches had stopped functioning. The tops of Barney's shoes were scuffed. My new dress was torn. And we both had the feeling of being contaminated in some way. So we took long showers, and then, thank you, we had breakfast and went to bed. Now when we woke up, we had left all our belongings in the car. And so the next day, or that day when I woke up, I went out to the trunk of the car to bring in some of my luggage, and that's when I found highly polished spots, same color, but highly polished on the trunk of the car. Well, so I called my sister and told her. At the time, the police chief was visiting, and he told me to call Pease Air Force Base and report this. So I did, and they talked to Barney and me both, and called back several times over a period of days to ask us more and more questions. Then Janet called back and said a physicist had take a compass, go around the spots and see what happens. So I did. And these spots, the compass just was totally erratic. The other parts of the car, okay. But these spots was really, I felt sort of afraid. I felt like I'd been contaminated in some way. So that's the way it stayed. And about 2 days later, our dog Delcy began a series of developing numerous skin eruptions. In fact, she was back and forth to the vets for about 2 years. My thought was, we had taken showers. We had not bathed the dog. Had we been exposed to radiation? If so, what kind? So Barney went to the library and got a book written by Donald Kehoe about UFOs. So I wrote him a letter wanting to know what kind of radiation we might have been exposed to. Well, I never did find out the radiation, but as a result, he sent Walter Webb to interview us. And that was the beginning. We had many years of contacts with Walter. Also at the same time, in Washington, Dr. Kehoe had talked with Holman and Jackson, who I think were associated with the space program at that time. And so they came and started questioning us. And we worked with them for many, many years, numerous contacts. But they were the ones who said, you did not see the sun, you did not see the moon setting. It had already set. So we have all these puzzles, no answers. So Barney and I decided, if we go back to the mountains, if we find the spot where we saw the men in the road, maybe we could remember what happened after that. So we began doing this. About once a month, we'd go up. Well, we didn't find the spot, but we would stop at restaurants and say, you ever see any strange lights in the sky? And we were deluged, over the period of hundreds and hundreds of reports of UFOs, people seeing them up close. So we at least established that there was a large number of sightings. And then on the second trip we had gone up, we came home, and on the kitchen table was a pile of dried leaves, which had not been there. When I went to clean them up, there were the blue earrings I was wearing that night. So this continued for a while, and then Barney's health began to fail. And he wasn't responding to medication, so his doctor thought he might have emotional problems. So he sent Barney into a local psychiatrist. And one day, Barney told the psychiatrist about our trip to the mountains. Well, he immediately picked up that we had mental amnesia, not forgetting, a real physical problem, and referred both Barney and me to Dr. Benjamin Simon in Boston for hypnosis. Now, I'm a social worker. First thing I did is I checked out Dr. Simon's credentials, which were very impressive. But I also knew something about hypnosis, and thank you, but no thanks, I wasn't having any. But I would go with Barney. So we started going to Dr. Simon. We were in 7 months. The first session was his explaining to me about medical hypnosis, which has no relationship to the hypnosis that's known. It's actually a medical procedure, and it was used by Dr. Benjamin Simon when he was the director of the Mason General Hospital in New York, and used in the treatment for servicemen coming back from World War II. In fact, he was so successful that the U.S. Army did a documentary of his work. And later, some of that documentary was reduced and was shown on TV and was called Let There Be Light. So now my first meeting with Dr. Simon. And he explains about the different stages of hypnosis and all. So I said, okay, I'll try it. So from January to June, we went to Dr. Simon for 2 hours every Saturday morning, incidentally at full price, no discounts for 2. And he was expensive. And our sessions were done individually, and at the end of each session, he put the amnesia back on, so we could not remember or discuss with each other what had happened. In that way, he could compare our telling of what had happened. And at the end of the 6 months, he opened up the amnesia so we could remember. So here's briefly what happened. The car motor stalled, the guys in the road came up, 2 groups, took us out, path in the woods to craft, where the craft was on the ground. There was one who spoke English. And right from the very beginning he said, don't be afraid. We're not going to harm you. All we want to do is some simple tests to find out how you and us are alike or different. And once the tests are over with, you can go back to your car and go home. Well, I didn't know whether to believe him or not. And they had Barney in some sort of a daze. He was walking and then he'd stumble and they'd drag him along. So that's how we found out how the tops of his shoes got scuffed. Now we got up to the craft. And I'm standing there. They said, go on. And I said, no way. Nope, I'm not going. And they grabbed me and I started fighting. I really put up a battle. And that's how my dress got torn. And there were two of them, they were bigger than me. So I had no choice, so I went on. We were taken in to separate rooms. Our exams basically were the same. They checked our eyes, ears, nose, throat, feet. They were very interested in our feet. Scraped our skin, hair samples, fingernail. Bonnie and me both were the same. But then with me, they had a machine, they said, was testing my nervous system. And then they tried to insert a needle in my navel, which he said was a pregnancy test. And it caused pain, so they stopped doing it. With Barney, they were particularly interested in his bone structure. And they put a cup-like instrument on his groin. And then, for purposes of identification, the one who seemed to be in charge, who spoke English, we called him the leader. The one who did the testing, we called the examiner. And there were 9 others who stayed out in the corridor, so we called them the crew members. So while the examiner is in with Barney, and by this time I'm completely relaxed, beginning to enjoy myself actually, and I said to the leader, I need something to take home to prove this has happened. He gave me a book. And I looked at it briefly. Basically, I was looking for pictures, but I didn't see any. And then I said, I know you're not from this planet. Where are you from? And he showed me a star map. And on the star map, there were broken lines that he said were expeditions, places they went once or twice. And then other lines that were solid, where they went all the time or frequently. And during the hypnosis with Dr. Simon, he gave me the post-hypnotic suggestion, excuse me, that I would sit down and without thinking, I would sketch the map, which I did. Then Barney's exam is over with, and then leading him out, and I pick up the book, and I start to leave the craft. And the crew members object to my having the book. So they took it away from me. And then Barney's leaving, so I start following him. And the leader began walking with me part of the way. And as he's leaving, I said to him, this has been the greatest experience of my life. I have been honored to meet you. Will you please come back? I have a lot of friends who would love to meet you. And he said he didn't know. It wasn't his decision to make. And I said, well, how will I know? And he said, you will know. And that's when I realized the significance of the blue earrings being returned. That's how I knew they knew where I lived. So that was the hypnosis. Now, that was in September '61. Somehow, a reporter from a Boston newspaper found out about our hypnosis. It ran for 5 days on the front pages of the newspaper. We had no idea what he was saying. We had to go to the store and buy the newspaper. In the meanwhile, we're being besieged by the media. So the first night, we took refuge out to Pease Air Force Base with the pilots. The second night, John Fuller was in the area. working on his book, Incident in Exeter. So this was our first meeting. We went out to dinner with John. Wednesday night, went to visit my parents, and as we're leaving my parents' home, a side street, we stopped at a stop sign to go onto the main highway. Directly in front of us is the second UFO we ever saw. And is going back and forth, and then it goes down. So we went back to my mother's house, picked her up and my sister. We were going to drive out to where the UFO was down and knock on the door. There was only one problem. They had gone down into the middle of a swamp, and we couldn't get near them. But from then on, every time that Barney and I went out at night, we had anywhere from 2 to 4 UFOs pacing our car. And they would go ahead of us in the sky. They would do all kinds of maneuvers, flashlights and all, and would follow us home. And we had no fear. The only one who was scared was the dog. She was always hiding behind me whenever they showed up. So now, this is the way. In the meanwhile, when our experience became known, then we became a focal point for everybody in the world to report their UFO sightings to us. So that actually I was able to compile a history of UFOs in New Hampshire. The first ones seen were in 1932, daylight sightings, 2 areas. And then 34, 36, 38, 40. War years, the volunteer sky watchers sat out nights watching the sky for enemy planes and reporting hundreds and hundreds of UFOs. And these were all called in to a central location who called Plattsburgh Air Force Base, and they would send planes out to check them out to make sure they were not enemy planes. So this went on. And then suddenly, February 25th, now Barney's health, Barney was in excellent health. And about 2 weeks before he died, he'd had a complete physical, nothing wrong. And he had an aneurysm. And on February 25th, 1969, he died very suddenly. Now, I continue to work. As I said, I think I'm a social worker. And one day I'm visiting a family, and she said to me, every night I stand in the kitchen window and I watch UFOs come in and land in that field out there. Well, that night at dusk, I'm back there, pulled off the road, sitting in the car. And I would say in less than a half hour, I counted 26 UFOs come in and land and take off. Well, after that, I felt the need for a cup of coffee. So I went to a small restaurant in the area, and I walked in, the place is mobbed, and everybody is telling each other all their UFO sightings for the last week. So I said, where? They said, join us. And that was the beginning. For 15 years, I joined them. Not only that, you name it, we had every occupation in the world. We had all kinds of TV, news media, scientists, doctors, engineers. We had labs doing research. And there was only one restriction. Nobody could reveal the area. This was our own private area. And actually, it was a learning experience. UFOs were teaching us things that they did, and we would talk back to them and try to explain our life here. And if you want to see a problem, you try to explain to a UFO about a Santa Claus parade. Or having turkey for Thanksgiving. We could show them the turkey farm in the area. But we did this. I filmed from early 1970s to about 1986, around there, I guess. And you'll see my slides. The next thing was the movie, the UFO incident. And at that point, everybody in the country, whoever thought they might have been abducted, contacted me. So I took on, I might say, Dr. Simon's formula. When a person tells a weird tale, it can be hallucination, delusion, fantasy, dream, or just something they remembered that they'd seen or heard before. And if you ruled out all that, then you have the truth. So I began working with people, and the sample I worked with, we developed this criteria. Most people who are abducted, usually they're in groups of 2, once in a while 3, or one single abduction, but that's rare. Every person who's been abducted knows or has, they might not remember exactly what happened on board the craft, but they saw the people before they were taken. And I always told them, no hypnosis. If it's a real experience, you don't need hypnosis. You will remember it. Bits and pieces will come back. 50% of them were in the emergency room at the hospital within 3 or 4 hours with all kinds of problems. Problems breathing, loss of balance, upset stomachs, eyes wouldn't focus, strange markings on their skin. Every one of them, except one, and that one was on a long-distance trip, reported this craft to the police or to the military, or both of them, within 3 hours. And so this is how we use this criteria to separate the real abductions from the fantasies. And we found out every real abduction is totally different. Nobody gets abducted twice, and every time a person gets abducted, they apparently are looking for information from themselves. Now, may we have my slides? Do I click this? Okay. Whoops. These are scenes from the White Mountains in New Hampshire. The first one was the old man of the mountain. When we came around the bottom, the UFO stopped and waited for us to catch up with it. And this is just some of the mountain scenes. Oops. That's it. I'm having problems here. These are mixed up. These are mixed up. I don't know how they got that way. Well, okay, I'll just have to play them the way it is. Okay, this is Route 3 that we were following that night. There's another scene of Route 3. This is Indian Head. This is the area where the craft left the top of the mountain and came out over the field where Barney walked towards it. This is where we saw the men standing in the road, where I'm standing here. We went back, we found the capture spot. And this is the path in the woods. And this is the spot where the craft was on the ground. Now I said, under hypnosis, I feel like I'm walking in beach sand. How can there be beach sand in the mountains? When we found the spot, that is beach sand. It's known as the old seabed. At one time in New Hampshire, it was way underwater, and then it withdrew, it left the beach sand. But in going back here, we were able to take measurements so that we know the craft was about 60 to 65 feet across. Okay, that's my star map sketch. And that's the identification. Now, that is not, I don't know if you can see, but see the big light? Right straight up, sun, that's us. The broken lines, expeditions, solid lines where they go regularly. Now Marjorie Fish, who did the research on this, worked for years. She couldn't complete it because I had two stars on this map that our astronomers did not find until 1969. And that ended her research. But not only that, I understand this map has been used by astronomers to give them a better idea of the distances between the stars. Okay. David Baker, who was a very well-known artist in New Hampshire, got together with Barney at Dr. Simon's home. And Dr. Simon put Barney into a trance, and Dave would sketch what Barney would describe. And then Dr. Simon would have Barney open his eyes and make suggestions and corrections. And this is basically what we saw when the car motor stalled. This one we call the Examiner. Well now, this is a little bit mixed up, so I'll just go ahead. These are what I call lights in the night. You're going to see, the ones at first are very simple, but these are UFOs coming down. And most of them have a streak behind them, and you see the different solid colors, no blinking lights. There's a red one. There's two coming down. It's another type. That's a disc with oval lights all around the edge. This is a group of different. There's another disc with different kind of lighting patterns. Oh, by the way, how I did these. I used Yashica movie camera, Super 8, filmed 18 frames a second, and then I sent the movie film to a friend who projected it onto a screen, and his camera and made the slides. And that's why you'll see the different colored backgrounds depending on the camera film he used. There's another one. Okay, see the streak of light on the side? Many times UFOs put down a beam of light. They vary in color, and they will come down the beam. Or sometimes they just put beams straight up into the air. This one, the one with the if these slides are in order, the two blue lights at the top, yep, left the group and came down towards me. There's two red, one yellow lights. Oh, okay. This here, the streak is the movement they're making. But the blue marking is a probe of a remote-controlled object. And the streak is the movement they were making while I was filming. Now, UFOs are always accompanied by remote-controlled objects. Excuse me. They vary in size from the size of an orange to a 4-foot ball. This is the movement that teardrop one made in 1/18 of a second. There's a teardrop, and then up there and down there there's a circular ones. Those are remote controls, 3 of them traveling together. That's a disc, and you can see the circular remote control attached to the side. It's a little darker. I hope you can see it. There's 3. There's a disc and a boomerang. There's another one. See, there's nothing consistent about UFOs. I call that one a flying wing. You have to try to find names for them. Okay, this is 7 UFOs flying together. This is what the pattern they separate to. And this is a very common pattern for 7 UFOs to fly around in. We see it many, many times. I call this one the flying jellyfish. And this is pink and blue. And I read that this was type was seen flying around Moscow. And they call it a jellyfish, so we can have a jellyfish here too. See, there was 2, now one just changed its light. Here's a green beam they came in on. Oh, now these are called mushrooms. These are my mushrooms. Hey, one changes to a blue color. The 3 of them, now they've got a blue one with 2 blue lights joining them. And then there's a blue remote control object down the bottom. I don't know if you can see it. More mushrooms. And this is the edge of a disc with the lights on it. This is the movement. See the red one at the bottom? When UFOs come in, they go slow, speed up, slow, speed up. The bright areas are where they slow down, and then they speed up and it's dim, and there's one at the bottom who's doing it. And that. Well, I won't. There's another one that shows the movement. Fast, slow, and there it is over on the left-hand side. Okay. This is two. You can see the two at the very, very edge. This is the movement that these two made in 1/18th of a second. And it's night. They're lighting up the whole area as bright as day. There's 30 here. See, the UFO would come in and land on the railroad tracks. And we all stayed away from it. But one night, this wise guy's going to walk up to it, and I'm filming it. 30 UFOs came in to make sure he did not walk up to it. He came back. The movement, the lines are the UFOs that are still moving, and then there's the ones that are stopped. This is the one putting a white beam up with his 3. Here's 19. I don't know if the blue, should be a blue beam seen on the left-hand side. They came down the blue beam individually and moved over and formed into groups of 5. And there's 19 there altogether. There's another odd one. Oh, these are 2 beams that came in. Now we got 1 beam, and that was flew in on the beam. And there it is without the beam. Now these are Polaroids, taken from Polaroids from my back steps where I live. They flew over my house. Now the colors, the beating effect actually is the result of the way the lights were flashing. See the difference, beating effect? See, there's some now beginning to come in using the blue beams, blue lights. Here's some ones coming in using red lights. And that's the end of them. Tried to count them, there's approximately 50. The one here, the important one, is the light-colored one, because it left the group. I call this my flying trash can. Now, I understand Ed Mitchell saw this out in space, but apparently when he saw it was farther away because he called it a beer can. But that left the group, and it came right down towards me, and it's tumbling, going boom, 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 like that. I've seen that one 3 or 4 times. This is a carrier. It used to come in horizontal, now they come in vertical. That's what they discharged. 9 of them. This is the front. Okay, not all, about 1977, UFOs began changing to look more like things that we were accustomed to see. I don't have a slide, but I have a picture of a plane, a helicopter, a disc, and a trash can flying together. This is supposed to look like a plane, only it's huge. And it made a roaring sound. It sounded like 10 jets, but I don't have the other sides with me. But this actually has wings that go up and down, like the wings of a bird. And they have blue lights on the end of the wings. Oh, somebody told about a remote. I'm explaining this to somebody the other day. That little light. Okay, I'm driving along, this UFO out here. It opens up a little sliding door in the bottom of the craft, and this object about the size of a basketball drops down. And as it travels away, it becomes lighted. Then it comes up behind my car, because I've stopped now to watch this. Comes up behind my car, becomes lighted, goes over my car, and that's a remote controlled object. At the bottom, those are my windshield wipers. And I don't know what's up in the sky. I didn't see it. There's some more. No, there's my trash can again. Oh, these are out of order. Well, anyway, this is what's supposed to be one of the last ones. As I said, the UFOs came in and landed on the railroad tracks. The other UFOs would come in and fly up to it. Apparently, we called it headquarters, because they'd fly off in different directions. And this one, you could see the 3 legs, and actually, it has 14 oblong lights that are white. But it also has other sides. And there it is earlier in the day, without so many lights on. There it is flying when it takes off, lighted. So you can see the shape. There's a remote control object at the bottom. This one, if you take it, has a slanted roof. See the light in the window in the front? See the head? Can you see the head? That's not a remote controlled object. The kids call this the Big Apple, because this one is about the size of 4 full moons. And it has a streak up above, it looks almost like an apple, has a remote control on the side. If they don't want you in the area, they just drift towards you, and you move so you won't get crushed. Oh, these are in wrong, but I can't. Let me see how. Okay, let me go back. Okay. These are in backwards, but okay. Let me do it this way. 1, 2. Okay. We started filming this one. It's flying around. And there it is dark at night. Okay. It's upside down, but what it says, printed, is IUC. And we're yelling, no, it's ICU. There it is in the beginning. Okay. What happened here? A UFO had landed. I went out, picked up some of the soil, put it in a plastic bag, brought it in, put it on the table. And as you can see, one half the plant just went shh and died, and the other half survived. So a friend took the picture. So be careful if you pick up soil, what you do with it. Okay, this one, I film up from my front steps. It's over the roof of the house next door. You can see the lighted windows. Okay, as this one came up the street towards me, I'm standing on the front steps filming. If a UFO is too close to you, you cannot film it. This is what happens to your film. You get all these colors. Right? And then the last one was a picture of it over the roof. Now this is one that was taken in the daylight up in the White Mountains. And I put this in because I've been told that in Belgium, this identical type picture has been filmed. See it in the sky, and then the object coming down the trees. Oh. I call this one the Supreme Commander. Actually, it has a tail on it, and it has a propeller on the top, like a helicopter. And when it flies, you can see the blue disc at the bottom. It's usually surrounded, and in 15 years it's been seen only about 3 times. So we figure it's high command checking out the troops. That's the last one?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. So now, in conclusion, let me say that after this experience, how do I know my own experience was real? Because at first there was the research in developing the needle in the navel, the research of the star map. Also, Pease Air Force Base released the radar report. They saw the craft. They sent 2 military planes up to check it out. The reports from the pilots are still classified, but we know that the craft left the area at 2:14 a.m. And then later, I went on Lee Bailey's program, Lie Detector. Lee questioned me for a half hour, and then I sat down and took lie detector testing in front of a whole wide world. And the question I was asked was, is it true you were shown the star map when you were on board the UFO in the White Mountains of New Hampshire on September 19, 1961? And the answer was yes. And I got hired. So, any questions? Now let me say this. Talking about miracles, I want to say that because of this experience, I've traveled all over the world. I've met with the top scientists. I've met wonderful, wonderful people. And I not only have met astronauts from us, but I met astronauts from another planet. And that, my friends, is a miracle. Thank you. Oh. What happened? What happened? What happened? Oh no, but that's me. My mother always said she never could take me anywhere.
And you do have about half an hour left if you want
No.
to just throw a couple of things.
I will. If anybody would like to look at it, this is my dress. I was wearing that night. Second time I worn it, brand new. The zipper was torn, and it became covered with a pink powdery substance. I put it outdoors, the powder blew away. It left pink stains. The holes, a piece has been cut out, sent to labs to try to analyze what caused the pink stains. nobody's been successful so far. Also, I was fighting, and the lining is all torn. I didn't go willingly. And then, meet Junior. Junior, oh, she's hitting my mic. Behave yourself. Marjorie Fish and I did Junior, and this is a composite of basically what the UFO people look like. Individual differences in every one. But he has been evaluated by physical anthropologists, and what he looks like now is what we may look like in about 25,000 years from now, along the path of evolution. Okay? Any questions? Yeah?
Are you still seeing UFOs? Have you ever taken pictures of
Excuse me. Lately, the last reports, very many UFOs with 9/11. They're checking out the World Towers. Traveling all up and down New Jersey, Long Island, Cape Cod, that area. And then I just heard that recently China and Scotland are being invaded by them. And they've had a lot of sightings in Brazil. But around here, no. It's very rare. In fact, I have a cousin who can sit in his living room in the past and film the UFOs out over the bay. You know, no problem. But they just haven't been there. Oh, I do want to say one thing. This just amazed me. Here in the audience are two people from New Hampshire that I haven't seen for years, but I used to go out in their backyard and film UFOs. And they're here today. I wonder if they recognized any of the homegrown UFOs. So, any questions?
Mrs. Hill?
Yeah?
Could you elaborate? At one time you said you were interviewed by scientists from the government or other officials. Could you elaborate on that and who interviewed you and who you spoke with, what scientists?
The scientists? Oh, good heavens. No. Most of the scientists that I met with were arranged by Holman and Jackson. But we would have meetings like for a weekend with 26 of the top scientists in this country. And I met with scientists in the Soviet Union, well, everywhere.
Was Sagan one of those?
Pardon me?
Was Carl Sagan one of those?
Oh, Carl Sagan. I knew Carl. I knew Carl, but he wasn't working with us. Yes?
Could you describe the writing in the book that they gave you?
I saw the writings in the book, and I've searched for years to find something similar, and I haven't been able to. It was actually a very, very simple type script. So I belong to two archaeological associations, hoping to find some script similar.
You talked about one incident on the craft, someone spoke to you in English, and then another time you said in your UFO that you had communications back and forth. Were those both in words or were
Oh yeah, actually, see, this 15 years, UFOs were studying this area intensely. Anything new, they were there. Like one of the farms is going to put in fruit trees. So they got the heavy equipment to dig the holes. Well, every night, the UFOs were flying around the fruit trees to see what progress was being made. They put in a new golf course. They were there every night to check out the progress. I mean, anything new. If there was a fire in the area, the UFOs flew over the fire trucks using red lights. Now, in New Hampshire, the police cruisers use blue lights. So if it's a police matter, blue lights, the UFOs have got blue lights. And we knew they were trying to study us, and we're trying to give them information. Well, we're not trying to prove they exist. All we wanted to know is what they were doing. Right? And like they would land, we go out and pick up samples, send them off, have them analyzed. I get all kinds of analysis of things left behind by UFOs. Now, somebody mentioned earlier about World War II. Oh, I know, Spielberg. We would go out and we assume UFOs have been here for a good many years, and they're not stupid. They must have learned our language by now. So we would go out, and I went out one night because this man asked me to deliver a message to them. So I went out, I'm sitting on the rock, and there's a UFO. I say, hey boys, if you can hear me, come closer. I have a message for you. So it would come closer and it blinked lights. And so I said, you may not know this, but it may be in your records. But during World War II, there was a plane flying from England to Germany, bombing Germany. And now they're on the way back, and the German Mings are chasing them. And they're having problems with the plane. And at that moment, the German planes flew away. And they were immediately surrounded by discs with multicolored lights all around the rim. And these discs accompanied them all the way back to England. And for months and months and months, people from Washington were flying over to question them about these discs. But he said, if you ever see a UFO, will you please thank them for saving our lives? So I'm sitting there saying, these guys want to thank you for saving their lives. You may not know them, but you got them in your record somewhere. And those are the kind of things we did. We try to explain anything going on in the community. They'd come down and sit down right over the roof of a school, having a school dance, and would stay there. They would come out and play organ music. I mean, we were all very friendly. They can come back anytime they want to. So, is that it? Yes.
Did you ever observe what they subsisted on, what sustenance or food?
Any food? We never saw any food that they had, no. No food. Yeah.
Majority of your pictures were taken there.
They're all basic, most of them are taken in the same area in New Hampshire.
And I never heard the stories that you presented. There's so much humor in it. I was wondering if your personality attracted them. You seem to have a rapport with UFOs.
I seem to have a what?
A rapport.
Rapport?
Yes.
I get along with most everybody. Yes.
I'm from St. Augustine, Florida. First thing I want to say is I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation here. And the question I have is, I heard someone talk that you had a pet, a doggy with you.
A dog? Oh, I had Delsey.
How did you come about?
Pardon me?
Did you have a dog?
Mm-hmm.
And how did it turn out?
My dog Delsey was with us, and he's the one that developed the skin rashes 2 days after this. That caused me to write the nightcap to Donald Kehoe to try to find out what the dog had been exposed to. Yep. And when I went out to film UFOs and go out to observe, I went out well equipped. I had camera, binoculars, compass, a civil defense radiation detector, gift from Washington, D.C., radiation detector in my pocket, and my dog and my cat. They went with me, so because I wanted to watch their reactions. Yep. Any more? One more question.
Well, most people are abducted repeatedly. Was yours a one-time event?
Of course. Once was enough. But I will say they didn't totally reject me. They came back. So, thank you for your attention.